Hello and welcome to the HMIS Privacy and Security Training prepared by CoHio. I'm Amanda, HMIS Support Coordinator at CoHio, and I'm just adjusting my audio a little bit here. This training is required for all persons who have access to the Ohio Balance of State COC HMIS. So if you're a new user, you should be watching this, and we require all our end users, both those with data entry access and read-only access, to review this training annually. So even if you've done this for a few years now, we have clarified and added some new material this year. So hopefully it will be useful to you. So the purpose of this training is to keep everyone current on the HMIS privacy and security policy, prepare everyone to pass the privacy and security quiz, which you will have a link for separately to do on ClassMarker, and review all the standards that are needed for the annual retest. So HMIS stands for Homeless Management Information System. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, brought HMIS into being because people all across the country were doing data collection in a variety of formats, and the creation of HMIS brought about a standardization of data collection rules, help to enforce uniform security methods, and ultimately help to reduce client duplication, which is a big goal of HMIS data. So the first set of data standards was in 2003, a significant amendment in 2004, some Violence Against Women Act clarifications in 2009, new version of the data standards in 2010, another new version of the data standards in 2014, and then last year critical updates were made, and we were told to expect some critical updates again this year. So it's a lot to stay on top of, and that's one of the reasons that we have to train on some of the stuff every year. So in the Ohio Balance of State, there is the HMIS Policy and Procedures Manual. You should definitely take the time to read that. It's pretty significant information clarifying how we implement HUD's standards and are in compliance with those, and also some things that are specific to the state through Development Services Agency, and also CoHio, things CoHio has added as the administrator of the HMIS. Another important document, of course, is the Data Quality Standards Manual. So this document specifically clarifies reporting and performance requirements for our continuum of care, and how HMIS is intended to fit in and reflect those requirements. So this training specifically, we're looking at protecting client data and how that is done. And the main focus around client data is specific to personally identifying information. So that's codified as name, date of birth, social security number, race, ethnicity, and gender. So additional data that's collected includes assessment information, income, benefits, and the kind of services that have been provided to the client. In our continuum of care, we honor informed consent to data collection. So that means that how much data is entered and shared is as much as possible directed by client preference, and that the client does have the ability to refuse some or all data collection, although in some cases the refusal to provide data may limit their ability to qualify for certain programs. So drilling down to look at that personally identifying information, the reason we collect name, date of birth, and social security number is to make sure clients are uniquely identified and reduce duplication in the system. That's important because the data is of higher quality when we know people aren't being counted multiple times. So if someone's had issue with chronic homelessness, has had several shelter stays, then if they had a new entry every time, then it looks like, 5 people instead of just one person. It doesn't tell us as much about that client's needs and doesn't help us address those needs as a system. So the way PII is used is specifically for deduplication and for coordination of services. So as we move forward to having more coordinated entry and access into our system and communicating, users who have access to the system, and that most of our projects have shared visibility between them. So they're going to have access to that client's personal information to understand, help qualify or move them into appropriate program. For instance, if someone was in a shelter and then got referred to a permanent supportive housing project, then the permanent supportive housing project would also have access to that client's personally identifying information to help get them into that program. So who has access to our system? What we refer to in the system as case management staff, so that may or may not be your official title, but end users in case management, service or program management coordination positions. The CoHio HMIS staff, myself, Matt, and Janelle currently, and the DSA housing staff, the grant managers who sometimes get into the system mostly for reporting purposes, but do have access to the system. And then in very rare instances, we do contact our vendor, Bowman Systems, for technical support. And in that case, for instance, if something technically isn't working in the application in a client record, then we might contact Bowman, and one of their tech support may need to look at that record to help ensure that the software is working properly. But they don't do anything outside of support with the data. So there's some specific rules provided by HUD for data collection. One is that you have a posted privacy notice in a visible place wherever you intake clients. So if you're in an agency or services setting, then you want to have that posted where you're most likely to be collecting data from clients. For those of you who do street outreach, I have joked that you should put it on a t-shirt and wear it when you're doing street outreach. That may be a little extreme, but you do want to make sure that you have a copy of that privacy notice available, and that while you don't have to hand it out to every single client, that information is available to prospective clients for them to know their rights. So we do not require at CoHio that you use a specific set of consent forms, but we are providing you with a data privacy notice and consent template. In our continuum of care, inferred consent is only acceptable for SSVF and RI clients. So for inferred consent, that means if you post that privacy notice and a client provides you with data, you can infer that they are consenting for you to enter that data into your HMIS. And while that's sufficient for HUD, as I mentioned earlier, our COC asks that we get informed consent from clients. So the only exception to that is for SSVF and RI clients who do not have the option of declining data collection if they want to receive services. Clients can still refuse to provide data, although, as I said before, this may make that client ineligible for certain services and certain programs. If they refuse to provide data, that would indicate their eligibility for that program, such as proof of a disability or income verification. So in addition to the privacy notice and consent, there is the release of information. I'm going to talk a lot more about how these forms work and what that means in terms of the data. But even when a client signs a release of information, they may still refuse to have certain information input into HMIS. Although, I repeat again, that may make them ineligible for certain services and certain programs. So to talk a little bit more about what is, in the balance of state COC HMIS, what does informed consent look like? And that means that the client has signed both the consent to data collection and the release of information. When both of those documents are signed, that means the client's information is shared throughout the HMIS for purposes of service coordination. The exception is for HOPWA and RI clients whose data is entered into projects that are not shared with any other programs in the system. If a client only signs the consent to data collection, then that means that their client record must be locked in Service Point, which is a relatively simple process. And that means that their data won't be shared outside of the project serving them and its associated provider, and then the people who are above what we call the provider tree in the system. So Cohio staff, DSA staff, Bowman staff, which is really just for software and data management. If a client refuses to sign the consent to data collection or the release of information, they refuse to sign both forms, in that case, you would enter their data what we call anonymously. The feature really is unnamed. So when you enter a client as anonymous in Service Point, it provides them with a unique identifier and does not include their name. Above and beyond that, in our COC, we ask that you not enter any personally identifying information for a client that is entered anonymously. So that means you would put client refused for Social Security, race, ethnicity, and gender. For the date of birth, we would ask that you put in a year that designates the client as an adult or child. And other than that, not put in the correct date and put partial date of birth recorded. So again, you can always get assistance from the HMIS staff for these specific steps, but it's just important to understand what your responsibility is to inform your clients of their, rights in terms of data collection and to understand how it's protected in the system based on the level of consent that they offer. So I dropped this beautiful chart that Janelle made into the presentation. A clearer, higher quality version of it will be available with the rest of the materials. And I'm not going to go over it in a lot of detail right now, but this is basically a flow chart to look at how to enter a client into HMIS in regards to what their privacy and security is. And we broke it up by project type. So, RI, HOPWA, HUD, PATH, or SSVF, VA program type. So as you can see for HOPWA, there's a note that the project is set up to share no visibility and exactly who can see, and that all the data should be entered. For HOPWA, if the client signed the consent to data collection, then that data can be entered. Again, that project is closed. But if the client did not sign the consent, then their data can be entered anonymously. For HUD and PATH, we're looking again at, did the client sign the consent to data collection? No, it's anonymous. Yes. Then we go on to, did the client sign a release of information? No, the data is entered, but it's kept locked. yes, you enter it. And then for SSVF, for VA, you're looking at, did the client sign the release? No, it's locked, or yes, enter all the information. So again, RI and VA SSVF clients do not have an option of anonymous entry. And it's not necessary to lock clients inside the RI project because that project itself is already locked. So if you have any questions about your specific program type and how to do data, you can always contact the Ohio HMIS staff for assistance. So within the assessment, let's talk a little bit about don't know and refused. So once you're entering a client's information, whether it's fully entered, a locked record, or being entered anonymously, within the assessments, most fields have an option to put client doesn't know or client refused. So if the client doesn't know the answer to a question, they may say that, and you can record that data. That means the client doesn't know, not you don't know because you didn't ask them. And refused. So the client has the option to refuse to answer specific data elements. But we reiterate that refusal may impact eligibility for certain programs. So if you refuse to provide information on disability status, then you would not be eligible for permanent supportive housing because disability is a requirement for entry into that type of project. Or if you refuse to provide income eligibility information, that may disqualify you from some forms of housing assistance that require that. It's really important to note a few things. One is that don't know or refuse data is considered missing for the purposes of state and federal reporting. That means if you mark client doesn't know or client refused, that data is still considered, it still counts as missing data, which is important. It's a client's right, but that data is still not available. And so when we're looking at the overall percentage of available data, it's still going to count in there. So I forgot to mention data not collected, which is really the reason we didn't put it in here is something that should be used very rarely and has less to do with privacy and security and more to do with data quality. So if you have questions about that or how that's selected, when that's selected and how to use it, you can let us know. But I just know that don't know refused can be challenging. So it's like, well, we entered what the client wanted, and it's like, yeah, but that data is still not available. So it doesn't count towards the overall picture of data that's available when reporting. And again, RI and VA SSVF clients do not have the option to put don't know or refused for most, if not all, of their data elements. The way that data is collected by the federal agencies that provide those resources does not permit that. Okay. So some things to think about when we're protecting client information. If you keep a paper file, which I think most of you at the very least are probably keeping signed consent forms on your property as opposed to just uploading them to the system, you always want to make sure client files that contain personally identifying information are kept locked, ideally double locked. So locked filing cabinet in a room that locks. When you're communicating clients' personally identifying information, phone is appropriate if you know you're talking to the right person. Fax is a waning technology, but can be appropriate if you know that the agency to which you are faxing is still using a dedicated line and not some type of electronic fax, which could cause a security issue if that isn't delivered directly to the recipient. Do not email client personally identifying information ever. That is probably the number one security breach, or one of the top ones that we have. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. It's, generally done by accident or with good intention, but the fact is that email's just not secure, and that can be a risk when you're sending clients personally identifying information. So don't do it ever. Not even first names. Maybe you've done first name, last initial, or first initial, last name at your agencies, but at Ohio, we do not accept that as a reasonable use of client PII. So always use a client's ID, service point ID, never use their name or any of their other identifying information. And then, of course, you would never talk about a client's personally identifying information with anyone other than someone you need to talk to for the purposes of service coordination or for supervision. So maybe you're getting assistance on what to do in a case from your coworker or your supervisor, but never with people at other agencies unless they are also serving that client or you're talking about the appropriateness of a referral, and never with anyone outside of your work. It's hard. Everybody likes to be able to vent, but it's just really important that you never share anything about a client that could inadvertently identify them, and certainly none of their personally identifying information. So the computer that you use for doing your HMIS data entry needs to be in a private location or supervised at all times. So if you're in a lobby of a shelter and you're doing HMIS, you can't be positioned in such a way that clients walking by or people coming in the door could see over your shoulder your monitor. While most people aren't doing that on purpose, people's eyes do travel, and it's just not appropriate. You need to make sure that your computer is positioned in such a way that no one who's unauthorized can see your screen, and that you if it's impossible to do that, but you're only doing data entry, when you're able to watch or have someone else watch for unauthorized persons coming by. It's really critical that you keep your login information private. That is the other most common security breach. Even someone else who has service point access, you cannot share your login information. This system is only as secure as all of us take the responsibility for following the rules and protecting the client data. So, and because the system creates an audit trail, and that's really critical for compliance and accountability, it's really, you cannot share your login information with anyone, not even your boss. Just going on, just no account sharing. If you have a new staff person or you need additional access, then contact the HMIS staff at Ohio, and we will help make that happen for you. This is more for people who are on the maybe management side of their programs, but it's really important that anyone who could potentially be in the space with client data or have access to client data at your agency respects these privacy and security measures and the HMIS policies and procedures. So if you're doing any contracting or you work with volunteers or people come in, you just have to be really careful and make sure that anything you're doing with client data was consented to by the client. Again, please notify the HMIS staff at Ohio if someone has left or is no longer working with HMIS. It's really important for us to keep the HMIS accounts very current and know who is accessing the system, and that their access is appropriate. So just some things about computer and network security. Your system must have a firewall and antivirus software. Do not save your HMIS password in your browser or have any kind of login. So if you have, I forget the names of the programs that can save your passwords, but you don't want to do that. We recommend using Firefox or Chrome. We've had hiccups with Internet Explorer. Haven't used Safari with HMIS a whole lot. But yeah, we recommend Firefox or Chrome, but it's not a requirement as long as it's working. And we also recommend anti-malware software for an additional layer of security. Do not write down your password to HMIS. Don't put it on your monitor, under your keyboard, in your desk drawer. If you absolutely must write it down, then it needs to be locked. Just like you would secure client files, you would need to secure that. It's really not a big deal if you forget your password or get locked out. You just call us at Ohio, and we will get you back in. Talked a little bit already about if your computer is publicly visible and how to protect that. And again, wallet or password, don't use any kind of automatic login or settings in your browser that would launch you right into the home screen. You need to be logging in and logging out every single time for that extra layer of security. Always log out when you're done using Service Point or if you're leaving your desk. If you're just getting a cup of coffee or running to the restroom, you want to make sure that you lock your desktop with some type of password protected screensaver. It's just a good habit to do. We do it at our office. Not everyone at Ohio has access to HMIS, just the 3 to 4 HMIS staff and 1 or 2 COC staff have access. So, we minimize our screens. We have our computers positioned so that people walking by can't see our monitors. And, if one of us starts to forget to lock their screen when they're getting up, somebody else will say, hey, don't forget to lock your screen. So, we hold ourselves to the same standard that we hold all of you to, because that's, again, as a community, how we help respect and protect our clients' data. So the security breach protocol can be viewed in full on our website. Again, most common mistakes are sharing a username and password or emailing personally identifying information. And what happens is, if once we become aware of the breach, your account is immediately inactivated. You have to take another quiz, kind of like the one you're going to take after this training. It's a little bit shorter and specific around just the client protection and security measures. You also have to complete the security breach acknowledgement form, which has to be signed by your supervisor or executive director, depending on your position. And that has to be received by the HMIS staff before we can reactivate your account. So don't email PII or share your login. That's the best way to keep that from happening. And of course, the most often when people do stuff like that, it is when they're in a hurry, trying to get grant reporting or applications done, and it's very inconvenient to be shut out of the system during those times. But that's what's going to happen because we have to follow these policies and again, respect and protect our clients' data. So any and all questions can be sent to hmis@ohio.org, and we will do our best to answer them. Please, if you haven't already, review the HMIS policies and procedures and the data quality standards. And you will need to pass the privacy and security quiz via class marker. And for those of you who are end users, submit a signed end user agreement. And make sure that your agency and agency administrator agreements are current. And then you will be given access to the system, or your access to the system will be maintained if you're doing a renewal. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and for most of all, for the work you do and your continued commitment to serving the people of Ohio with dignity and respect. We really appreciate everything that you do and guarding their data and having high quality data as part of that. Thanks so much.